that, I increased my income 10 times in 10 years. 10 times in 5 years. And so I kept doing it. I increased my income 10 times more in the next 5 years. Now 10 times times 10 times is how much?
20.
It's 10 times. 10 times 10 is 100 times. I was earning 100 times within 10 years. And this is income tax return. This is not fancy money. This is what you had to declare on your income tax return. And I couldn't believe it. It was just so easy. It was almost automatic. It was just like pushing a button on an elevator. It just kept going up and up and up and up. And why? Because I just learned a little bit each day, use my time well, focus on my most important tasks, upgraded my skills. Does this sound like hard stuff? And I've had people all over the world come back and tell me, I used that formula. I doubled, tripled my income. I increased my income. One guy said, I remember he came up to me and sadly said, Brian, I've been using that formula since you taught it to me several years ago in Portland. He said, it doesn't work. And I said, really? And he gave me a big smile. His name is Chris. He said, it didn't take 10 years to increase my income 10 times. It only took 7 years. Last year, I reported on my income tax return 10 times what I had been earning when I first met you. And everybody I've ever met in the world says it doesn't take 10 years. Because once you get into the rhythm of learning and growing and setting priorities every day, it just becomes automatic. You just get better and better. You use your time better and better. But imagine 2% per month, 25% per year, double in 3 years, double, double, and double. Is that possible? Yes. And once you've learned it, here's an interesting thing. It's like an airplane. Once you get to this altitude, you never go back to a lower income, which is quite amazing. There's all the psychology of that we could spend days on. But basically, you develop a self-concept level of income. There's you heard Donald Trump there. They accused Donald Trump of having gone broke and been bankrupt and lost all this money, and now suddenly he's worth another $5 or $6 billion. How did that happen? Well, he learned how to make $1 billion. His father loaned him $1 million 30 years ago, and he was able to turn that into more and more and more. And then the recession hit. And anybody know about the recession hitting? The Great Recession, the Depression, the collapse of the real estate market and everything. So he lost it all. He was out there, stretched out, gambled, leveraged everything else, so lost it all. He was telling his wife when he was walking down the street a few years ago, went past a homeless man. And he said, you see, that homeless man's worth more than I am because I have a negative net worth of $800 million. I mean, he's broke, but I'm worth $800 million negative. And then what he did is he just went out and used the skills he had developed to earn it, and he earned it all back again. There's a wonderful story about Mike Todd, who was a play producer in New York, very famous, married to Lana Turner, in fact. And he was the one who said that being Lana Turner, not Lana Turner, I'm sorry, Elizabeth Taylor. He said being Elizabeth Taylor's fifth husband is a bit of a challenge. He said, I know what to do. He said, I just don't know how to make it more interesting. Anyway, it's probably too quick for you. But, but anyway, so he invested all of his money on a play. And the play failed. He lost all his money. And so a reporter came to him. He's a very well-known guy in theater. Came to him and said, well, Mr. Todd, what's it like to be poor? And he said, excuse me, young man. He said, I'm not poor, I'm just broke. He said, broke is a temporary condition, poor is a state of mind. I'm just broke. That's a temporary condition. And that's a really good thought. Poor is a state of mind. I just finished a book on this, by the way, called Get Smart, How the Most Successful People Think in Every Area of Life. And the 10th chapter is the difference between rich people and poor people, how they think. And rich people think a specific way. Based on exhaustive research, poor people think the opposite way. Rich people are always thinking about how they can increase or create wealth. Poor people are always thinking about how much everything costs and how they can't afford it. And whatever you think about most of the time, you attract into your life. So rich people are always attracting opportunities to earn more money, and poor people are always broke. And their refrigerators break down, and somebody runs into their car, and everything costs too much. And they just did a study. 70% of Americans said that if they had an unexpected $400 bill, like for a refrigerator repair or a car repair, they said it would put their lives into trauma. They would have to borrow the money. They would have to get a new credit card. They'd have to go to friends and relatives. $400 would stop their lives, almost like one of those crash dummies where the car hits against the wall and the dummy goes all to pieces. It would throw their whole life into trauma. Can you imagine that? It's scary. And these people are just as smart, just as good, just as competent, have just as much education as anybody else, but what do they think? They think poor. They think, getting off the subject. So If you think like this, if you get 2% better every single month, the compounding effect is absolutely extraordinary. And there's only one person in the world who can stop you from doing this. Who's that? It's yourself. You stop yourself from doing it. But here's a wonderful question. If you do something repeatedly over and over again, what do you eventually develop? A habit. And once you develop a habit, as Goethe said, everything is hard before it's easy. To develop a habit, it takes tremendous hard work. You have to resist the comfort zone and resist the tendency to go back to doing things that are fun and easy and useless, doing B things all the time. But once you have developed the habit, it's automatic and easy. You get up in the morning and you just go naturally into your morning routine where you exercise and prepare and you do your reading and you do your planning and you start work and you hit it all day long. I mean, it just becomes automatic. And it's more easier for you to do the things that are good for you. And the wonderful thing that I said earlier is when you're doing all these things that are good for you, you're happy all the time. You have energy all the time. You release your creativity. People will say, how come you're always so positive? It's because I'm always busy doing stuff that I really enjoy and getting better and better at it. This is not a deep thought, but it is the great secret of success. It's how rich people think. So here's another question. We've talked about your most valuable asset is your earning ability. Your earning ability takes 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, 10 hours a week for you to become one of the highest paid, most successful people in your field. You can start at any time, anywhere, and start investing back in yourself. The number of learning resources that are available to you today are beyond imagination. All you have to do is just start plugging away. If you want to earn a lot of money, here's a secret I learned from when I was 24 years old. Find the highest paid person in your field and go to them and say, what advice could you give me of things to learn or do that would help me to be successful like you? And you know what? If you ask Dustin, if you ask Michael, you ask anybody, they'll tell you. They'll say, well, this is what I learned. This is what I learned. This is what I did. And you know what? Every single master was once a disaster. Every single person that's in the top 10% started in the bottom 10%. The people who are at the top in your business at one time did not even know your business existed. And then they got into it and they began climbing the ladder. And they just kept climbing the ladder. They never stop climbing. Every day they're climbing. Never go to bed without being a little bit smarter than they were the night before. And so when we talk about these things, you say, boy, this is pretty simple. I mean, there's nothing complicated about this. No. What does it require? It's called the big D word. What's the D word? Discipline. Napoleon Hill, after a lifetime of studying success, said that self-discipline is the master key to riches. If you've got the discipline, as Warren Buffett said, to focus. If you have the discipline, you own the world. If you don't, you must work for someone else, and you must work for less money, and you must worry about money all your life. But of course, discipline is a habit. And so what do we know about habits? It's the more you practice them, the easier they get until they become automatic. So here's another question for you. What is the highest paid work that you do? Most important, highest paid work that you do? Thinking. Absolutely right. You've been reading my stuff? Pardon?
100 hours.
Thank you very much. Well, thinking, what is your name, sir?
My name is Vartan.
Vartan?
Vartan, yes.
V-A-R-T-O-N?
V-A-R-T-A-N.
Is that, that's Eastern European, right?
Excuse me?
Eastern European?
Armenian.
Armenian. All right, that's very far east. Sorry. Vartan. Well, he's absolutely correct. Is the concept that I learned when I began studying time management. They asked me to put together a program on it at Nightingale Conant. So I said, sure. You know, whenever somebody asks you to do anything, when you're a beginning speaker, you always say, sure. And then you sit down and put the phone down and think, oh my God, I don't know anything about this subject. So I did a full court press for a year on time management. I read the top 10 or 15 books on the subject. I bought all the audio programs and listened to them from cover to cover and took notes. I traveled around the United States, including Toronto, and I took 6 full-day time management courses given by experts and institutes. I got 10 time management systems from all over the world. 4 of them were in foreign languages, and I had to have friends translate them for me. And then I took all of that material together and I put it into a time management system called Time Management for Results. Within 2 years, all the other time management programs on audio had been withdrawn from the market. This became the best-selling time management program in the history of the world. And then it went on to CD, and it's gone into video training courses and so on. My point is, what I learned was the word consequences. And this is one of the most important of all words. Is something is important, I discovered, to the degree to which it has big potential consequences. Something is unimportant to the degree to which it has low or no potential consequences. So one of the most important things you do is before you do anything, you think. And think, what are the likely consequences of doing this or not doing this? In fact, the mark of your intelligence is how good you are at predicting the likely consequences of a behavior. If you can say, if I do this, I'm going to get these results, and you do, that's the highest form of intelligence. But many people will actually engage in behaviors that not only do not give them positive consequences, but leave them far worse off than they would have been if they'd done nothing at all. There's a principle in business and economics called the law of unintended consequences. And in our government today, the governments, because they're so preoccupied with public opinion polls and the next election, they are throwing money at anything that they think will buy them votes. We're sort of like the commodities exchange where everybody is shouting and screaming and bidding and so on. Well, that's what our politicians in Washington are. Both sides of the aisle, they're shouting and screaming and bidding to get votes. And the way they do it is they give people free money. And what they do is they find anybody who's got money, you look like you've got money, we'll raise taxes on you. You're successful, you've got land, you've got property, just raise taxes so we can just give this money to people to buy one more election. And we've now reached the point where we're out of money. And what do you do when the party's over? All the politicians, by the way, have set up all of their pensions, medical, everything, so that they're not affected by the U.S. economy. They are stabilized at a certain purchasing power. So if the economy collapses, they still continue to get their money. None of the politicians are subject to Obamacare. That was the only way they got it passed, was put in a proviso that nobody who works for the government will be subject to Obamacare. Only working people, only average people who, as the Obama advisor said, the average American was too stupid to know what we were pulling over on them. And he said that, and they said, you're not supposed to say that. Oh, he was the advisor said, if we can get this past the American people, he said, they're too stupid to know what's about to happen to them. So they went to the politicians and won by 1 or 2 votes, is we promise that you will never be subjected to this. So will you support it? And you'll be able to buy a whole bunch of votes on the next election by going back and telling everybody you got them all this free medical care. Free medical care? Yes. Anyway, so the law of unintended consequences says that many things, and virtually all things that governments do, brings about consequences vastly worse than if they had done nothing at all. So just be aware of that. And in life, often we do things, for instance, we do things like watching television. And the average American watches 3, 5, 7 hours a day of television. We watch television and then we don't understand why the years go by and our incomes never go up and we always have high bills and we don't have any savings and life sucks. And we're sitting there watching television. We don't realize the unintended consequences of developing the television watching habit or the binge watching habit, which you heard about. The unintended consequences of that are a life of disaster, a life of impoverishment and financial worries. Anyway, so consequences is the way that you think determines the quality of your decisions. The quality of your decisions determines the quality of your actions, and the quality of your actions determines the quality and quantity of your results. So everything comes back to thinking. And the more time, like your mother always told you, take time to think about it. Take time to think about it. The biggest mistakes we ever make is when we just make a decision without doing any due diligence. We don't do enough thought. All the money I've ever lost in my life, and everybody who makes money loses money some way, it comes from not doing enough research. If you'd done the research, you'd have never lost that money. But it seemed like a good idea at the time. That's why your mother says, sleep on it, take time. Between the bigger the gap, they have found scientifically, the bigger the gap between the idea and the decision, the higher the quality the decision will be, because you'll have more time to think about it.